Hi everyone, so here we are in Maya, which is the main software we're going to use for this tutorial. And before jumping into planning and animating, the first thing we want to do is to pick a cool character for our animations. So on that note, I highly recommend to check out Kyle Figgins rigs. He has plenty of really amazing characters, and one of the key aspects of them is they are all consistent when it comes to like both controllers and setup, which is very handy. So the model was done by Geoffrey Ferrandez based on a concept by Natalia Gushenkova. And once we have our character chosen, in this case Blackthorn, we can go into Maya, where the first thing we always want to do is to reference the character in the scene. That way we make sure if there's any updates on both the meshes and the rig, it's going to update in our Maya scene, which is very handy, and also it's going to help us avoid a lot of issues later on down the line. So once we have that sorted, we also want to make sure the frame rate is 30 frames per second. And a couple of extra things I always like to set up is, here, as you can see, it's really easy to click on the meshes. So I like to untick that option up here, so we avoid that. And also on the show tab, I like to hide everything but the curves and the polygon. That way you have the minimum necessary to just focus on animation. You can obviously show locators or other stuff if you are going to work with on the scene, but if not, in the meantime, with those two should be more than enough. And also, for example, this character has plenty of extra layers, armor plates, clothing pieces and stuff. So I like to set up my own layers. So we select here in the outliner, for example, the mesh for the clothing and create layer from selected. We can change the name to cloth, for example, and with just one click, we can hide and show those meshes, which is good as we can leave it as it is right now, so we can focus on the key poses, the mechanics and everything. And once, for example, we have our animation polished and at the state we like it, we can then show all the extra pieces and then focus, on layering that on top and give that extra texture to the animation. So once we have all this set up, we can start checking the rig. As I said before, they are really good, and here, one of the things I really like is like you have the option for visibility for all the extra controllers. As I said before, this rig is very heavy when it comes to secondary motion, so it's good that we can hide all of this. That way we don't get distracted, especially on the early stages of the animation process. So obviously the usual controllers, like the body control, the hips, IKFK for pretty much everything, which is handy. In this case, I like to animate the arms on FK. And one of the things that is set up by default and I really like is the wall space on both arms and also the head. That way, for example, if we rotate the chest, as you can see, it's not going to affect both the rotation and the position of the arms and the head, which is really nice, especially when we animate like walk cycle and rack cycle. So that's good. The chest, as I said before as well, you have IK and FK. In this case, I really like the IK setup in here, so I'm gonna leave it as it is. And we also have the leg control, which is very good as well, because you have the basics one, but also plenty of sliders. For example, you have a really nice toe roll, you have just for the toes, you have a toe tip as well. We can all use all of these later on during the cycles, which is really nice. And quickly as well, I wanted to show, as I mentioned before, I really like to work on wall space. This rig has as well the option to set up all the extra clothing pieces as well in wall space. That way they don't inherit the rotation from the hips, which is really nice. So that way we can focus on have those nice poses later on when we are refining. So let's hide this so we don't gonna get distracted. And last but not least, the prop, which has a really cool option, which is the pinning here. That way we can like pin like to left hand, right hand, the hips, and it's good because it gives us like a constraint by default, so we don't need to worry on like creating locators, set our own constraints and stuff. This way, for example, in this case, we attach to the right hand and it's gonna follow the wrist, which is really nice. And for both the walk and the run cycle, we're gonna leave it in the back, because that way we don't need to worry too much about the prop, but also it's gonna give us like a really nice silhouette. And with this, we'll dig more into the rig later on as we animate, but this is just to have like a brief overview of how it works and how I like to set up the scene before we jump into animating. And for the next step, we'll start with the planning of the walk cycle.